What if one man could shake the foundations of America's political establishment, defy the experts, and rewrite the rules of the game? That's exactly what Donald J. Trump did, and Charlie Kirk's The MAGA Doctrine explains how. In this book, Kirk dives deep into the principles, battles, and philosophy behind the movement that stunned the world in 2016 and beyond. Today, we're unpacking every chapter, giving you a complete, engaging, and powerful summary of the MAGA Doctrine. By the end, you'll not only understand the philosophy, but also why Kirk calls it America's blueprint for renewal. Charlie Kirk opens by defining the MAGA Doctrine as more than a slogan. It's a philosophy rooted in liberty, skepticism of authority, and a revival of individual responsibility. It's about resisting overreaching government, questioning elites, and trusting everyday Americans over bureaucrats and global organizations. He frames it as a return to America's founding values while looking forward to a dynamic, prosperous future. Chapter 1. The Great Disruptor. Charlie Kirk begins his case by portraying Donald Trump as the quintessential disruptor. For decades, American politics was trapped in the predictable back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. Both parties became comfortable, entrenched, and reliant on each other for survival, creating what Kirk calls a political cartel. The left pushed for welfare spending, the right demanded military expansion, and in the end, taxpayers funded both. Real change was avoided in favor of power preservation. Into this stale environment stepped Donald J. Trump. Trump's strength, Kirk argues, was his ability to sense how out of touch the political establishment had become with the average American. While pundits repeated the same talking points and intellectuals debated in think tanks, Trump was speaking directly to the concerns of everyday people. Jobs leaving the country, endless wars with no victories, mass immigration, and the loss of free speech under political correctness. His bluntness, often criticized, was actually what resonated. He said the things both parties had long agreed to never say, and millions of Americans realized he was voicing their own frustrations. Disruption, Kirk writes, wasn't just a political tactic, it was a necessity for survival. Kirk also compares Trump to previous conservative movements, especially the neoconservatives who had once influenced Republican policy. By the Bush years, these elites were openly defending ideas like American empire and big government conservatism, far removed from the founder's vision. Trump cut through all of it. He dismissed endless wars, questioned sacred cows within the Republican establishment, and even challenged Fox News when necessary. In doing so, Trump transformed the Republican Party into something new, a populist, pro-worker, pro-peace party that defied its old stereotypes. For Kirk, this was the beginning of the MAGA Doctrine, the disruption of a failing order. Chapter 2. The Outsider from the Inside. Trump, Kirk explains, was uniquely positioned as an outsider who knew the inside. He had lived among the elite, attended Wharton, rubbed shoulders with billionaires, and built a global business empire. He knew how the game was played, and more importantly, how corrupt and self-serving it was. But rather than protecting the system, Trump used his insider knowledge to expose it to the American people. This is why the establishment, from media to lobbyists, feared him. He was not guessing at their corruption. He had seen it firsthand. Kirk illustrates this by listing Trump's achievements in his first 2 years. Record low unemployment across demographics, deregulation that cut bureaucratic red tape, a surge in manufacturing jobs, and renewed energy independence. If Hillary Clinton had accomplished these things, Kirk argues, she would have been showered with praise, awards, and monuments. Instead, Trump was demonized. The hypocrisy revealed just how biased and protective of the establishment the media truly was. To drive home his point, Kirk compares Trump to Cicero, the Roman orator who defended the republic against elites conspiring to replace it with empire. Like Cicero, Trump was vilified for exposing corruption, not for creating it. Trump's instincts, Kirk argues, were not random. They were rooted in the same values that built America: independence, free markets, and individual liberty. His brusque style was less about temperament and more about impatience with a system that was actively betraying those values. Trump's role as an outsider gave him credibility with the public that no career politician could replicate. Chapter 3. No more accepting decline. For years, Americans were told that decline was inevitable. Economic stagnation, endless wars, and a bloated government became the norm. Politicians shrugged and said, "This is just how the world works." Trump rejected this fatalism. Kirk notes that Trump tapped into a forgotten truth. Decline is often a choice, not destiny. By questioning assumptions and refusing to surrender to globalist narratives, Trump showed that America could grow again, prosper again, and lead again. Kirk uses examples like NATO and foreign aid to illustrate how Trump pushed back against complacency. Why should American taxpayers fund global defense while wealthy allies failed to pay their fair share? Why should America lose manufacturing jobs while politicians praise trade deals like NAFTA that hollowed out the middle class? Trump's refusal to accept decline was revolutionary because it challenged both Democratic globalists and Republican corporatists. His insistence that America deserved better reignited hope among those who had given up on politics altogether. Chapter 4. America First. At the heart of the MAGA Doctrine is the principle of America First. Kirk explains that this does not mean America alone, nor does it signal isolationism. Instead, it is a return to the basic duty of government, to serve its own citizens first. Trump embodied this through policies like withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, renegotiating NAFTA into the USMCA, and prioritizing border security. Every decision was judged by one standard. Does this help Americans? Critics derided America First as selfish, but Kirk reframes it as fairness. No other country apologizes for prioritizing its people. Yet Americans were told they must sacrifice jobs, resources, and sovereignty in the name of globalism. Trump shattered this orthodoxy, making clear that strong borders, fair trade, and national independence were not radical. They were common sense. Kirk emphasizes that America First was not about turning inward, but about ensuring that international cooperation happened on fair terms. Chapter 5. Ending the Endless Wars. Trump's break from bipartisan foreign policy orthodoxy may be his most disruptive move. Kirk argues that for decades, Republicans and Democrats alike clung to interventionist strategies that drained trillions of dollars and cost countless lives without delivering victory. Trump was the first president in generations to ask the obvious question: why are we still fighting these wars? By resisting calls to escalate in Syria, questioning America's role in Afghanistan, and pressuring NATO allies to carry their own weight, Trump defied the military-industrial complex. Kirk praises Trump's courage to stand against defense contractors and entrenched generals who benefited from perpetual conflict. Ending endless wars was not weakness, Kirk insists, but wisdom, focusing resources on defending America rather than rebuilding hostile nations. The MAGA Doctrine redefines strength as restraint and accountability, not blind intervention. Chapter 6. Making the Economy Work Again. The economic boom of Trump's first term is central to Kirk's argument. Trump slashed regulations, cut taxes, and fought for manufacturing jobs long dismissed as gone forever. The results were historic: record low unemployment, optimism among blue-collar workers, and a revival of industries from steel to energy. Kirk highlights how Trump's approach contrasted with Democrats' belief in government as the solution to every problem. Instead of creating more programs, Trump created opportunities. Kirk also stresses that Trump understood business because he was a businessman. Unlike Obama, who told entrepreneurs, "You didn't build that," Trump celebrated builders, innovators, and risk-takers. Deregulation wasn't about letting companies pollute, Kirk argues, but about freeing them from redundant rules that stifle growth. The MAGA Doctrine made clear that prosperity comes not from bureaucrats, but from the ingenuity of the American people. Chapter 7. No More Low-Energy Nation. Kirk describes Trump's famous phrase, low energy, as more than an insult. It was a diagnosis of the nation. America had grown sluggish, weighed down by bureaucracy, defeatism, and declining confidence. Trump's relentless energy, optimism, and unapologetic pride reversed that mindset. His rallies, speeches, and even tweets projected vitality. He made patriotism exciting again. The MAGA Doctrine, Kirk argues, is as much spiritual as it is political. It's about rejecting the idea that America must settle for mediocrity. Trump's confidence, sometimes dismissed as arrogance, was contagious. He reminded Americans that their country was not in decline, but still capable of greatness. In Kirk's telling, the revival of energy and spirit was as important as policy reforms. Chapter 8. America is not a mistake. This chapter directly confronts narratives that paint America as irredeemably flawed. Kirk argues that the left increasingly portrays the nation's history as one of oppression and injustice, demanding guilt and apology. The MAGA Doctrine rejects this. America, Kirk insists, is not a mistake but a miracle, a nation that, despite flaws, has advanced liberty, prosperity, and human dignity more than any other. Kirk emphasizes that acknowledging America's imperfections does not mean denying its greatness. Trump's unapologetic patriotism was a rebuke to elites who sneered at American exceptionalism. By affirming that America is fundamentally good, Trump empowered citizens to take pride in their country again. The MAGA Doctrine restores gratitude where cynicism had taken root. Chapter 9. An American Great. Kirk places Trump in the tradition of transformative leaders, those who rise in moments of crisis to challenge elites and redirect history. Like Reagan, Churchill, or Lincoln, Trump faced ridicule and hostility yet refused to yield. His resilience in the face of investigations, impeachment, and nonstop media attacks proved his toughness. For Kirk, this endurance is part of what makes Trump an American great. The chapter underscores that greatness is not about perfection, but about courage. Trump, despite flaws, fought battles others avoided. He disrupted the establishment, kept promises, and reawakened national pride. In Kirk's framing, Trump's legacy is not merely political, it's civilizational. The MAGA Doctrine, embodied in Trump, is a call to courage and leadership that echoes through history. Chapter 10. The Justice Reformer. In this chapter, Kirk highlights one of the most surprising aspects of Trump's presidency: criminal justice reform. Traditionally, Republicans were associated with a tough on-crime stance, while Democrats emphasized reform. Yet Trump, breaking political molds, signed into law the First Step Act in 2018. This landmark legislation reduced mandatory minimum sentences for certain nonviolent offenders, expanded rehabilitation programs, and gave thousands of inmates a chance at early release through good behavior credits. Kirk portrays this as proof of Trump's ability to govern pragmatically rather than ideologically. While critics painted Trump as uncaring or divisive, the First Step Act revealed a willingness to listen to communities, especially African-American leaders and pastors who had advocated for reform. The law was celebrated across party lines, showing that the MAGA Doctrine could combine strength and compassion. For Kirk, Trump's justice reform symbolizes fairness, punishment for wrongdoing, but also redemption and second chances for those who prove themselves. Chapter 11. Making America Well Again. Healthcare reform was another defining issue. Kirk explains that Trump's efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare reflected the MAGA Doctrine's core belief: freedom of choice must come before government mandates. Obamacare, he argues, forced millions into costly plans, imposed penalties for noncompliance, and centralized control in Washington. Trump worked to dismantle the most burdensome parts of the law, such as the individual mandate, while expanding more affordable alternatives like short-term plans and association health plans. Kirk emphasizes that Trump's vision for healthcare was not about creating a single perfect government program, but about unleashing competition, lowering drug prices, and empowering patients. He points to Trump's executive orders aimed at transparency in hospital pricing and efforts to allow states greater flexibility in Medicaid. In contrast to Democrats' push for Medicare for all, which Kirk argues would bankrupt the country, Trump's reforms sought to protect both quality and affordability while respecting individual freedom. Chapter 12. The Tech Sector. In this chapter, Kirk warns of the growing power of big tech companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon. He argues that these corporations are no longer neutral platforms, but partisan actors shaping the national conversation, often silencing conservative voices. The MAGA Doctrine calls for challenging this monopoly of information and ensuring that free speech, the cornerstone of democracy, is not undermined by Silicon Valley elites. Kirk describes Trump as one of the first leaders willing to openly confront big tech censorship. From warning about algorithmic bias to issuing executive orders against online suppression, Trump highlighted how unelected executives had gained unprecedented control over public discourse. Kirk frames this as a battle between freedom and control. Either Americans defend open debate, or they risk living in a digital world where dissenting voices are erased. In Kirk's view, the fight against big tech is as crucial as battles over taxes or foreign policy. Chapter 13. Protector of the Bill of Rights. Kirk insists that Trump was not just a political figure, but a guardian of constitutional liberties. The MAGA Doctrine, he writes, is rooted in preserving the Bill of Rights against encroaching government power. Trump defended religious freedom by protecting faith-based organizations from hostile regulations. He upheld Second Amendment rights against calls for sweeping gun control. He championed free speech, even when that meant defending controversial voices. Kirk contrasts this with Democrats who, in his telling, sought to restrict liberties under the guise of progress. For example, hate speech laws threatened the First Amendment, while gun control measures jeopardized the right to self-defense. Trump's consistent position was clear. Rights come from God, not government, and must be protected at all costs. The chapter underscores that without these freedoms, America's identity would unravel. Chapter 14. Judicial Legacy. One of Trump's most enduring achievements, Kirk argues, was reshaping the federal judiciary. With the help of the Senate, Trump appointed over 200 federal judges and 3 Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. These appointments tilted the judiciary toward constitutional originalism, ensuring that courts would interpret the law rather than legislate from a bench. Kirk emphasizes the generational impact of these decisions. Long after Trump left office, his judges would continue to shape rulings on religious liberty, gun rights, abortion, and executive power. For Kirk, this legacy proves that the MAGA Doctrine was not just about short-term policy wins, but about restoring fidelity to the Constitution. The judiciary, once dominated by activist judges, now had a stronger foundation for defending liberty. Chapter 15. Promises Kept. Politicians are notorious for making campaign promises they never intend to fulfill. Trump, Kirk argues, flipped that script. Whether on tax reform, trade renegotiation, or border security, Trump made tangible progress on nearly every major promise. He worked on building the border wall, slashed taxes, cut regulations, recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and pursued fair trade deals. While not all goals were completed, the consistency of his efforts stood out. Kirk stresses that this credibility deepened the bond between Trump and his supporters. People felt they could trust him because he treated campaign pledges as binding commitments, not marketing slogans. Promises made, promises kept became more than a slogan. It was proof that a politician could actually deliver. In Kirk's telling, this honesty reinforced the populist core of the MAGA Doctrine. Leaders must serve the people, not themselves. Chapter 16. The Great Agitator. Trump's confrontational style is often criticized, but Kirk frames it as essential. As the Great Agitator, Trump refused to let elites dictate the terms of debate. He called out the media as fake news, exposed hypocrisy in Washington, and provoked conversations about immigration, trade, and patriotism that establishment figures preferred to avoid. His agitation, Kirk argues, was not chaos for its own sake, but a strategy to reveal uncomfortable truths. By sparking outrage, Trump forced Americans to confront issues hidden by political correctness. His willingness to push boundaries energized his supporters and frustrated his enemies. Kirk draws parallels to historical reformers who stirred controversy but ultimately changed their nations for the better. The MAGA Doctrine embraces agitation as a tool for awakening, not division. Chapter 17. The Opposition to MAGA. Kirk dedicates this chapter to explaining the scale of resistance Trump faced. From the Democratic Party and mainstream media to academia, Hollywood, and even some Republicans, the opposition was relentless. Investigations, impeachment, leaks, and coordinated attacks filled his presidency. Kirk frames this opposition not as principled disagreement, but as desperation from elites terrified of losing their grip on power. He argues that the deep state and establishment figures relied on a system that enriched them while leaving average Americans behind. Trump threatened that system by empowering workers, questioning trade deals, and refusing endless wars. The ferocity of opposition, Kirk suggests, revealed just how revolutionary the MAGA doctrine truly was. The harder Trump was attacked, the more his movement solidified. Chapter 18. Never Surrender. Kirk portrays Trump's resilience as the spirit of the MAGA doctrine itself. Impeachment, media scandals, constant lawsuits, and cultural attacks would have broken most politicians. Trump, however, never surrendered. He fought back against critics daily, using social media to bypass hostile outlets and speak directly to supporters. This relentless perseverance became a model for his movement. Never bow to elites, never concede to corruption, and never lose faith in America. Kirk emphasizes that this attitude is not about blind stubbornness, but about conviction. The MAGA movement, like Trump, must hold the line even under overwhelming pressure. To surrender is to let elites rewrite history and silence the will of the people. For Kirk, never surrender is both a Trumpian motto and a timeless American principle. Chapter 19. An American Heritage. The final chapter ties the MAGA doctrine to the broader arc of American history. Kirk argues that the movement is not merely about Trump, but about reclaiming America's founding heritage, self-reliance, liberty, faith, and national pride. Trump, in this sense, was less the originator and more the catalyst, a leader who reminded Americans of who they truly are. Kirk emphasizes that the MAGA doctrine should outlast Trump. It is a philosophy rooted in timeless values, meant to be carried by future generations. By rejecting decline, fighting globalism, protecting freedoms, and restoring pride, Americans can preserve the miracle of their nation. The chapter closes with a rallying cry. America's greatness is not an accident, but a legacy, and it must be defended with courage. Charlie Kirk's The MAGA Doctrine is both a defense of Donald Trump's presidency and a manifesto for the future. It presents Trump not as an aberration, but as a course correction, an outsider who reminded America of its core values. From economic revival to cultural battles, from foreign policy to freedom of speech, the doctrine is framed as a call to courage, resilience, and patriotism. Agree or disagree, one thing is clear. The MAGA movement has reshaped American politics, and its legacy will endure long after Trump.